We are getting some breaking news in the investigation into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie.
Instead of clarity in this case, I think it's fair to say the case has taken a pretty sharp turn. There's been alleged ransom demands all week long. Different ones, some resolution to one at least, no resolution to the other ones. Law enforcement activity across this case has intensified. It's been on, it's been off, it's been on, it's been off. And that was the day again today and yesterday. Signals that something significant actually might be unfolding. We received your message and we understand. We beg you now to return our mother to us so that we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace. This is very valuable to us and we will obey. Okay. So, Saturday night, just a flurry of activity 4 miles down the road from Nancy Guthrie's home, the crime scene from which Nancy Guthrie was abducted at Annie Guthrie's home. There were 3 vehicles that showed up. They were unmarked, white vehicles parked, and multiple sheriff's deputies went into the house. We have some clues that are very strong, and I think we could have some answers coming up fairly soon. I'm not talking about a search. I'm talking about a solution. We have some things I think that will maybe come out reasonably soon from FBI, DOJ, or whoever that could be definitive. A lot has taken place in the last couple of hours. I think you're being too nice in this situation. With all due respect to the sheriff, you know as well as I do, the time she was discovered missing is very important. It's not 7 days. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for an entire week. And rather than bringing the kind of answers that time and investigative resources should produce, this case has spiraled into something nobody saw coming. We are talking nighttime raids on family properties, flash photography inside darkened rooms, federal agents probing underground tanks behind the crime scene, alleged ransom demands with a Monday deadline, and most jaw-dropping of all, a sitting US president aboard Air Force One saying he's discussing a solution, not a search. And that something definitive could be coming soon. It's been a weekend unlike anything reporters, investigators, or the Guthrie family have experienced since the night 84-year-old Nancy vanished from her Catalina foothills home. Veteran journalists who've covered active investigations for years will tell you that nighttime is typically when things go quiet on location. Security rotates in, watchers are posted, and the real work waits for daylight. That is absolutely not what unfolded this weekend. Not at Nancy's home, not at daughter Annie Guthrie's property 4 miles away, and not in the corridor between those 2 addresses where FBI agents have been pulling surveillance footage from Chevron Station and a Circle K, specifically asking those businesses about vehicles caught on camera. Reporters stationed outside Annie's home spotted something that immediately caught their attention. One described what appeared to be either an unusually large, thin case, silver or white, or possibly a folding white table being carried inside. Not long after, those same reporters noticed something even more striking. Investigators moving through the darkened house without switching on the lights. Lights flickered briefly toward the back of the property. Then went dark again, and then came the flash bulbs, bursts of light popping through unlit rooms as though photographs were being taken in deliberate darkness. On Saturday night, 3 unmarked white vehicles rolled up to Annie Guthrie's home. Several Pima County Sheriff's deputies entered the property. The family did not appear to be present. For the next 3 hours, the scene outside the house raised more questions than it answered. Lights appeared briefly at the rear of the home and then cut out. Flashbulbs or something that looked remarkably like them, fired repeatedly inside rooms that investigators were clearly keeping dark on purpose. Speculation immediately turned to luminol, the chemical compound used in forensic investigations that reacts with hemoglobin and produces a faint luminescent glow, but only in complete darkness, which is precisely why lights are switched off when it's applied. Here's where things get complicated, though. Observers on the scene noticed a glaring absence. Not a single officer entering or leaving the property was wearing Tyvek suits or any kind of forensic protective gear. Luminol testing typically demands full contamination precautions. No protective suits, no large evidence prep bags. Nothing of the sort was observed being carried in. Whatever was happening inside the dark house for 3 hours with flash photography was either something entirely different, or it was a forensic procedure being conducted without the standard precautions that seasoned crime reporters would expect to see. When at least one deputy eventually emerged, reporters clearly identified the Pima County Sheriff's insignia on the uniform. The deputy was wearing blue latex gloves and carrying what appeared to be a brown paper bag. Evidence bags take many forms. Some look exactly like brown paper bags. Whether this particular bag was sealed remains unclear, but the image of a gloved deputy exiting a darkened home after 3 hours of flash photography at 10 o'clock at night is the kind of visual that speaks for itself, even without a single word of explanation. The officers left without addressing the press assembled outside. Not one comment, not one statement. Reporters, including Brian Enton from NewsNation and Michael Ruiz from Fox News, were left to document what they observed and piece together what they could from what was visible. Then came Sunday, and a discovery behind Nancy Guthrie's own home that stopped everyone cold. Agents located what appeared to be a large underground tank in the area behind the pool and garden, removed a cover roughly 2 feet in diameter, and began probing downward into the space beneath with a long implement. The sight of federal investigators physically probing underground tanks at the home of a missing woman carries an unmistakable weight. It suggests the search has led somewhere specific, somewhere a body could be hidden, somewhere that sealed, biologically active conditions would accelerate decomposition dramatically. Local reporting confirmed that properties in this neighborhood are not connected to a municipal sewage system. Each home operates on its own individual septic tank. A water delivery truck had been spotted near Nance's property earlier in the week, fueling speculation about whether what agents probed was a cistern, a well, or a septic system. The parallel to the Jennifer Dulos case was drawn immediately. That 2019 investigation in which agents searched septic tanks at a suspect's property looking for a missing mother of 5 who was never found. A New Mexico case was also referenced in which a killer concealed victims in manure, and where expert testimony established that decomposition in that kind of environment moves at a dramatically accelerated rate due to heat and biological activity. The probing of that underground tank happened on day 8, 7 days after authorities formally called off the search around Nancy Guthrie's home. 7 days after the sheriff publicly stated there was no need to continue looking in the immediate area, and now agents are back at that same property lifting covers and reaching into whatever lies beneath the surface. Then came the timeline problem, and it is a significant one. The story the sheriff had been telling publicly was that around 11 a.m. on Sunday, the morning Nancy's disappearance was discovered, a friend from her church noticed she hadn't showed up for services. The family was notified, went to the house, looked around, and called 911 approximately an hour later. That hour-long gap drew immediate scrutiny. Blood had reportedly been visible at the front entrance. Who finds something like that and waits an hour to call for help? Then the timeline was quietly revised. At a subsequent press conference, the sheriff presented a completely different sequence. The family arrived at Nance's home and discovered she was missing at 11:57 a.m. Then called 911 just 6 minutes later at 12:03 p.m. The controversial hour, the gap that had generated intense public debate, simply vanished from the official account. Legal analysts following the case were pointed in their assessment. The time at which a missing person is discovered is among the most foundational facts in any investigation. It does not shift by a full hour due to miscommunication. That is not how these things work. The church element of the story has also attracted scrutiny. Reporting from the Daily Mail and from Brian Enton established that Nancy Guthrie had not physically attended church since the COVID pandemic. She watched services via live stream, a one-way broadcast from the church that viewers could access from home, but one that offered no way for the church to see who was or wasn't tuning in. There would be no mechanism for a church friend to notice Nancy's absence from a one-way stream. The original account that someone at church flagged that Nancy hadn't shown up and alerted the family requires an explanation that has not been publicly offered. One possibility raised was that Nancy may have had a habit of watching the stream simultaneously with a friend over a phone call, and that friend couldn't reach her that Sunday morning. Perhaps a simple explanation exists. But combined with the sealed 911 call, the revised timeline, and the questions about the church notification, there is now a cluster of unanswered questions surrounding how that Sunday morning discovery actually unfolded. On the family communication front, Savannah Guthrie posted a video to Instagram that observers immediately described as coded, deliberate, and emotionally loaded. Standing alongside her siblings, she delivered a message that read in part, "We receive your message, and we understand. We beg you now to return our mother to us so that we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace. This is very valuable to us, and we will obey." Former FBI agents and hostage negotiation specialists who reviewed the video noted that the phrasing hit very specific marks. The kind of carefully scripted communication that law enforcement helps families construct when negotiating with a potential abductor. The phrase "we will obey" is not organic family grief language. It reads as negotiation language shaped by professionals for a specific purpose. But the central question hanging over every ransom-adjacent development remains: are these communications real? A trial attorney with 3 decades of experience noted the operational contradiction at the heart of the alleged kidnapping. Kidnappers depend on privacy and silence. They do not choose victims whose disappearances will trigger wall-to-wall national media coverage. FBI mobilization, presidential statements, and the most intense public scrutiny of any missing persons case in the country. Kidnapping the mother of a Today Show anchor is, from a pure operational standpoint, almost impossibly counterproductive if anonymity is the goal. According to reporting that was briefly published and then removed by a local Tucson television station, the alleged kidnappers set a demand of $6 million in Bitcoin due by 5 p.m. Monday. A prior deadline reportedly set for the previous Thursday had carried a $4 million figure. The jump from 4 to 6 million after a missed deadline is consistent with ransom escalation, but it is equally consistent with opportunistic scammers who have been watching the news coverage and calibrating their demands to what they believe the family might be willing to pay. The full picture of where this investigation stands is both exhaustive and somehow still deeply unresolved. Surveillance footage is being pulled from businesses along the route between Nance's home and Annie's. Underground tanks are being physically probed behind the crime scene. Flash photography is occurring inside a darkened family home at 10 o'clock at night. Private security personnel are retrieving mail from Nance's mailbox wearing gloves. Deputies with lights flashing are visiting neighboring properties and conducting searches. And through all of it, the sheriff continues to publicly state that no suspects, no persons of interest, and no vehicles of interest have been identified, while also acknowledging that not everything being discovered is shared with the public, and that investigative strategy shapes every disclosure decision. Nancy Guthrie remains missing. 7 days without her medication, 7 days without her hearing aids, 7 days without the daily rhythms that kept an 84-year-old woman tethered to the people who love her. And the President of the United States has said from Air Force One that he is working toward a solution, something definitive, something that may arrive reasonably soon. A Monday deadline looms, and whether it belongs to a real kidnapper or a predatory opportunist feeding off a family's worst nightmare remains one of the many things this investigation has not yet answered. If you have any information about Nancy Guthrie's whereabouts, contact the FBI at 1800-CALL-FBI or submit a tip at tips. FBI. Gov. The reward currently exceeds $1.2 million.